If you're a member of the Five Nights at Freddy's community, you've probably heard of Theft King. A commentator and self-proclaimed reporter of fandom drama, his channel has accumulated almost 200,000 subscribers in the span of 6 months. His discussion of hot FNAF-related topics, flashy thumbnails, and concise nature among other factors have made him the juggernaut he is today. With how prominent his videos are, one could say his name is accurate because he is quite literally the king of his kind of content. Unfortunately though, every monarch sits on a throne atop a mound of skeletons, and those skeletons are starting to emerge into the public eye. From toxicity to fear-mongering to clickbait to playing victim through it all, today I'll be discussing the many faults of Theft King. I'd like to preface this video by saying I am not a FNAF fan, at least not in the same way all the people I'm talking about are. I have played some of the games and I think they're cool, but I'm in no way involved in the wider community, and as such I can't claim to be an expert. I'm going off my observations of the events described, perspectives I've received from people who actually are in the community, and my own personal experience with Theft King. I don't have the full story for everything I'm going to cover, but I believe I have enough to make an analysis and state my opinion. I'd also like to say that while I will be laying out a lot of Theft's wrongdoings, I don't condone aggressive pestering or legitimate harassment of any form. Adding more fuel to the fire is never a good idea. In short, just have some decency. So, where do we start? Well, Theft King created his YouTube channel years ago, but remained completely irrelevant up until the beginning of 2022. And I mean the very beginning, as his first popular video, a discussion of what went wrong with the heavily criticized FNAF security breach, was uploaded on January 1 of this year, followed in quick succession by his next couple of videos. His first viral video was uploaded on January 9 and accumulated over 1 million views. This sort of consistent success right out of thin air is not common on this site, so understandably, Theft further wedged himself into his newfound niche with a swarm of FNAF-related videos, and it worked like a charm. In spite of his controversies, you'd be hard-pressed to argue he isn't really good at building and maintaining an audience around him. The first controversy I'm aware of when it comes to Theft has to do with his video on Aftonbuilt, a FNAF fan game created with the intention of making its way into the Fanverse initiative, unfortunately rejected by FNAF creator Scott Coffin after a long, painful series of miscommunications. Theft's main source for all this information was Jelly Liam, the lead developer of Aftonbuilt, who had a very negative experience trying to get involved with the Fanverse. From my understanding, Theft was criticized for not including an alternative opinion, a testimony from someone with a more positive Fanverse experience as it were. However, Theft claims he did try to reach out to Kane Carter, a well-known Fanverse developer, for that purpose, only to never get a response. Following his video on Aftonbuilt, Theft went on to release a series of 3 videos about the controversy surrounding Poppy Playtime and the less than savory history of the people in charge of developer Mob Games, especially in regards to manager Zach Belanger's past harassment of another game developer and independent animator, Coaster. This is all stuff I too have extensively covered in the past, and if you're still unfamiliar with the topic, I strongly recommend you watch my 3 videos about it. Funnily enough, Theft's coverage of the Poppy Playtime controversy was how I got acquainted with him in the first place. He was offered membership in Project Underwater, the investigative group my friends and I were part of, and although he declined, he remained in touch with multiple of us and Coaster himself. Anyway, Theft's first video was very straightforward coverage of the situation, with him going into the history of Enchanted Mob, the company behind Mob Games, and the poor treatment of Coaster by Zach Bell and the others on top. Theft made sure to point out that not everyone on the Mob Games team were responsible for the actions of those guilty few, but he was still very explicit when he said he would not be buying the game or supporting it in the future out of principle.
With Enchanted Mob presumably being the primary beneficiary of Poppy Playtime's success, I can't in good conscience purchase any future chapters of the game or support these people in any way. I believe that they were put through hell by these people, and all while they were just a kid. And when you combine it with NFTs, the movies, the animated cartoons that they're double posting to YouTube, it just looks like a cash grab, and it's not something that I can support anymore.
By the time Theft had uploaded his first video on Poppy Playtime, the allegations he covered were being spread all over the internet, and public pressure was beginning to turn on Mob Games. So shortly thereafter, Zach Bell and his brother Seth both released statements on the matter. Theft then made a second video tearing apart these frankly awful statements and breaking down everything wrong with them.
A few hours ago, Poppy Playtime developer Mob Games CEO Zach Bellinger, one of the 2 brothers known as Enchanted Mob, released a statement on Twitter addressing several of the controversies and allegations that were put forth in my video. I didn't actually intend to make a follow-up to that video, and I'm not interested in milking a controversy. I had already said everything I wanted to say regarding Poppy Playtime in the last video. However, I also didn't expect the video to blow up the way it has, nor did I ever expect Enchanted Mob to respond. As you'll see in their response, they appear to have a policy of not addressing rumors and disregarding criticism as simply being hate, so I was stunned to see that not only did they respond, but that they addressed Coaster directly and even apologized to them.
In his second video, Theft doubled down on what he said in the first video regarding Zach Bell, Seth, and everyone else involved in Mob's past controversies, ragging on them and urging the community to be careful about supporting Poppy Playtime given what the people who stood to earn the most profit from it did. This is all well and good so far, and Theft was viewed largely positively at the time for using his platform to hold mob games accountable. That was until his third video. Shortly after Theft's second video came out, Zach Bell watched it, and due to a misinterpretation issue, wrongfully assumed Coaster wanted to speak with him and receive an apology. This led to Zach reaching out to Project Underwater, myself included, which is how we learned his side of the story. Dags, another content creator and one of our members, proposed an interview between Zach and Theft, to which Theft begrudgingly agreed. During this interview, Zach provided insight on the history of Enchanted Mob and admitted to his past mistreatment of Coaster, expressing remorse in the process. And thus, Theft's final video on the Poppy Playtime controversy was all about his interview with Zach, and let's just say he has an odd shift in opinion between his last video and this one.
Zach, you are the CEO. You're the president. You're the executive producer. Everyone else involved are among the first names of the credits. Poppy Playtime is your project, and yeah, your past actions absolutely reflect on it. You're basically telling people, hey, yeah, my friends and I screwed up, but it's not fair to punish the entire team over this. I'm sorry, but no matter how many people you hire, you remain the primary beneficiaries of Poppy Playtime's success. You're asking people to ignore your actions for the sake of your employees, yet you conveniently omit that you probably stand to make millions of dollars if the franchise continues to succeed. Maybe more. Enchanted Mob, Zamination, Zach. I think you hated Coaster. I don't know if it was the contract situation, the fact that they found success with videos similar to yours. I have no idea. I'm sure lots went on between the two of you. However, at the end of the day, a kid who was inspired by you reached out to you, and you stepped on him. Coaster abandoned the animation community entirely over their interactions with you. You and your friends were legends of the YouTube animation scene, yet you drove a young, aspiring animator who looked up to you to abandon their art entirely. That is the greatest animation sin that anyone can commit. At the end of the day, Zach is the CEO of a company. He has employees, some of them surely have families, and all of them are relying on him. His obligation is to his company first and foremost, and he's good at that. As Zach said, he wasn't the nicest person at times. He was a young person who suddenly came into immense popularity and scrutiny. We've all done things that we regret, especially as kids. No matter how you feel about Zach or Enchanted Mob's channel or Coaster or anything else, let's remember to evaluate the game on its merits as a game alone.
These videos were uploaded within 10 days of each other. Now, I understand that Theft could have shifted his opinion on Poppy Playtime because Zach was just nice to him and delivered his side of the story really well, but the change still feels so incredibly drastic. He went from urging his fans to be careful about supporting a game with morally questionable profiteers to saying no one should actually care too much and just judge the game as a game. These two statements do not go together. In his third video, Theft generally has a surprising amount of positive things to say about Poppy Playtime, which is odd considering, as a reminder, he said at the end of his first video,
with Enchanted Mob presumably being the primary beneficiary of Poppy Playtime's success, I can't in good conscience purchase any future chapters of the game or support these people in any way. I believe that they were put through hell by these people, and all while they were just a kid. And when you combine it with NFTs, the movies, the animated cartoons that they're double posting to YouTube, it just looks like a cash grab, and it's not something that I can support anymore.
Theft even received a free key from Zach, allowing him to play Chapter 2 of Poppy Playtime without paying a cent. Technically, Theft said in his first video that he wouldn't monetarily support the game in the future. So to me, this comes off as a very sneaky loophole. Immediately after receiving this key, Theft promoted the game further by streaming it, which again just feels weird considering how adamant he'd been about not supporting it before. For the record, I don't have much of a problem with his third video, and his efforts to fairly consider both sides of the story in his case were respectable, but something does feel wrong about how quickly he was willing to warm up to the game in spite of what he said in the past. I wasn't the only person who thought this. Some even even went as far to speculate that Zach could have bribed or threatened Theft into switching sides, so to speak. But I personally don't think these theories have any validity. In my opinion, it more so seems like Theft wanted to appeal to both sides of the situation and potentially attract more of an audience of Poppy Playtime fans. Whatever the case, I can't help but point out the shift in Theft's standpoint doesn't feel as genuine as it should, and I can understand why some people were suspicious of him as a result. The thumbnail he used for this interview video was also very odd and painted the picture of a much more alarming, more negative situation than the one actually described in the video. This is at the very least misleading, and I believe Theft used this thumbnail because he knew it would get him the most clicks, which again feels ingenuine. I understand that we all exaggerate with our thumbnails and titles sometimes. Hell, I did the same today. That said, there's a difference between doing that and outright miscommunicating the tone of the video. This isn't the last time he used a questionable thumbnail though. Before I move on, here's where I get to talking about my personal experience with Theft. After his third video interviewing Zach Bell came out, I saw that people on Twitter were accusing him of accepting a bribe from Zach to switch his opinion or speculating that Zach had threatened him into doing so. At the time, I respected Theft for his previous coverage and wanted to be able to dismiss these rumors, as did the rest of Project Underwater. I was also in the middle of working on my final video, which was meant to clear up previous misconceptions and wrap a bow on all the drama. As such, I contacted Theft through Twitter DMs and offered for him to defend himself so I could vouch for him in the video. He did provide me with some screenshots and context about his interview with Zach, but he then tried to dissuade me from making the video in the first place, claiming he had a hunch it wouldn't be received well and that he didn't believe it would add anything new to the public discourse surrounding the situation, which was just not true. I was mainly making my final video to explain Project Underwater's place in the drama as well as what Zach told us, which hadn't been touched upon by anyone up until that point. My secondary intention was to correct misinformation I'd spread in my first video, which I would be obligated to do no matter what. In the end, I decided I wasn't going to touch on the bribery/threatening allegations against Theft in the video anyway because I didn't want to give any credence to them or distract from the main point, and that was that. Throughout this whole conversation, Theft gave off this really peculiar, interrogative aura. I'm not sure what his intentions were, because the way he spoke to me was really confusing and frankly weirded me out. I'm going to upload a full breakdown of the conversation on my second channel in case you want to make sure I'm being honest about what went down between us. Link will be in the description. So yeah, I just got an odd feeling from him, and while I brushed it off at the time, I now believe it makes sense for me to share this experience because it goes hand in hand with the interactions he's had with other people. I'll get to that later. But I digress, let's pick up where he left off, in the wake of Theft's final video on the Poppy Playtime drama. By now, a growing number of people were starting to openly dislike Theft. Hell, on my own final video, the same one he tried to convince me not to make, he left a comment and all the responses were harshly negative. There was even a subreddit made just for Theft King haters, which I think more than anything is a testament to how dedicated some people can be to their opinions on the internet. But all of this was fine and dandy, really. Theft continued to pull in gargantuan views of his videos and moved on from his controversies like nothing had really happened. He was making bank off of YouTube, so as long as he was succeeding on that front, did anything else really matter? Well, apparently now it does, because this situation would be the last one he'd brush off like a flea. The next controversy Theft got into was fairly minor. On June 12, an anonymous Twitter account by the name of Liam Crush, not to be confused with Jelly Liam, the Aftonbuilt developer I mentioned earlier, released a document exposing 3 other prominent Fanverse developers, Ultranite, Meklas, and Ramanov, for gathering information secretly about Fanverse games with the intent of eventually leaking it to the public. This led to a massive explosion of drama in the FNAF community, which Theft was quick to capitalize on, promising to make a video about the situation. He was immediately flamed for trying to rush headfirst into this drama in almost no time, especially when it had a very real negative effect on many people. However, he still ended up going through with it, and surprisingly, he did a good job, with public opinion shifting somewhat back in his favor, as many in the community praised his video on the situation for being accurate and well-researched. Theft was in the clear for now, but not for much longer. The next time he got into drama, his true colors would finally show. After his video on the Fanverse leak situation, Theft went on to follow it up with a video criticizing the Fanverse initiative for its negative effects on the community. The video itself had some good points and most didn't have a problem with it, but the issue was his thumbnail and title, which gave off the impression that the Fanverse was ending, a notion that was far from the truth. This was another example of Theft using a misleading thumbnail, and people were not too happy with it. Fanverse developer Kane Carter tweeted the following in response to seeing the thumbnail. And he was just promoting Arcade's stream release in a livestream like 2 days ago. A video saying, "The end of the Fanverse instantly makes our work feel like a waste," or an example of a failed product. We are the ones trying desperately to save the image of the initiative. A month later, Sheep Rampage, another commentary channel of a similar nature to Theft, made a similar video with a fear-mongering thumbnail, and Kane reacted to it by posting this tweet. 1. Pop Goes Arcade releases on Steam, 98% rating. 2. Funko and U2's merch out this year. 3. Nixon is allowed to work on the Joy of Creation again. 4. Thiznom with plenty of FNAF Plus dev updates. Every FNAF YouTuber in the world. The Fanverse is a failure. Scott failed us. The initiative is doomed. Although Kane was prompted to make this tweet by the existence of Sheep's video, he didn't mention any particular YouTuber. However, a lot of his fans believed he was talking about Theft, and allegedly some people went over to Theft and started harassing him through Twitter DMs. There isn't any evidence of this, but let's assume it happened. Either way, Kane can't be blamed for the fact that some of his fans went after Theft because he didn't directly engage with Theft in any way when writing a tweet. Kane did not send anyone to harass Theft, and the idea that he did so is completely ludicrous. However, the fact that Theft was getting bothered in the first place obviously meant he was going to get involved. Rather than addressing Kane's current tweet, Theft responded to his mumbled tweet regarding his clickbait thumbnail and said this. Similar to his reaction to Sheep's video, Kane appeared to feel betrayed that I supported plus streamed Arcade, yet also was critical of the Fanverse. It feels very, you're with us or against us. One can support the game/devs, but at the same time be critical of the initiative. In his response, Theft failed to acknowledge what Kane's issues with him were in the first place. Kane wasn't bothered by Theft criticizing the Fanverse, but rather using a fear-mongering title and thumbnail to give off the idea that the Fanverse was dead or dying. Another user named Roxas explained this in the following reply. The issue is you guys use clickbait to draw easy attention, making things sound worse than it actually is. If you're gonna take this seriously, don't use clickbait titles/thumbnails like the end of the Fazbear Fanverse initiative or why the Fazbear Fanverse initiative failed. I think this was a fair statement and highlighted how Theft missed the point Kane was trying to make. At this point, one might expect Theft to take the criticism to heart and begin working on making his thumbnails and titles less misleading, but that's not what ended up happening. Theft instead went on to create a video regarding the situation within which he once again deflected criticism by saying he was actually very positive about the Fanverse, Kane, and his game, Pop Goes, and using clips from his videos to prove it. Again, Theft dodged the point and misconstrued the criticism against him as over the fact that he was critical of the Fanverse, rather than over the fact that he had a habit of using fear-mongering titles and thumbnails. Theft also claimed in this video that he had been receiving constant harassment because of the tweet Kane had made about Sheep, and that Kane had ignored him when asked to make a statement condemning the harassment. The thing is, Theft never backed these claims up with any evidence. Just to be clear, if it's true, I obviously don't condone the harassment he received, in spite of his faults, and I do agree that Kane probably should have condemned it in a statement. Still, Theft neglecting to display the harassment he was allegedly going through was understandably suspicious in the eyes of many, who believed he might have been trying to play the victim to dodge criticism. Later on, Kane responded to the video with a twitlonger linking to a FNAF Rickroll edit, masked as an apology. In short, he didn't take Theft seriously because he was still dodging his critics, and thus he trolled him. While funny in a vacuum, I would argue this was certainly not the best way for Kane to respond. Again, I don't think it would have been too hard for him to proclaim that harassment is bad. It's just a common courtesy, and I think I would have done it if I were in his situation. But in fairness to Kane, he doesn't have a moral obligation to do anything because again, he is not responsible for the harassment happening in the first place. Theft ended up taking this troll very, very seriously, and the whole situation in general was supposedly really starting to get to him and affect his mental state. Later that day, Theft streamed for hours, letting out his emotions and displaying a whole lot of instability. I didn't get to watch the whole stream, but from how people are talking about it now, it seems that Theft had a legitimate breakdown. Reportedly, he also blamed everything he was dealing with on Kane, who again didn't intend for any harassment to begin with. And he even claimed at the end of the stream that Kane was a vindictive, evil person and that he'd burn in hell for eternity.
Seen in the last few days, I think Kane Carter is a vindictive, evil person. I'm not religious, but like if there was a hell, Kane Carter will burn for eternity. Like that's straight up the kind of person I think he is.
Which to me is not something anyone of sound mind would say. I'm going to have to channel my 25% Scottish heritage for a second to fully articulate my thoughts. Ya laugh ya head man. Anyway, Theft continued to upload tweets about the situation where he repeated over and over again that he was being harassed. He also finally acknowledged why he was being criticized to begin with by bringing up his thumbnails, but he pretty much brushed it all off rather than say anything meaningful about them. I'd like to point out he still hadn't provided any evidence on his Twitter or his YouTube channel that he was facing harassment at such a massive scale, and I'm not sure if he and many of the rest of us have the same definition of harassment to begin with. The overwhelming majority of what I saw on Twitter was not hate, but more so criticism about his thumbnails and titles, as well as frustration at his refusal to properly acknowledge said criticism in the first place. Some people did take things too far, with a few telling him to leave the community and never return, but they are demonstrably a minority compared to the people acting within reason. I'd like to remind you all of something Theft said in his very first video on Poppy Playtime.
As you'll see in their response, they appear to have a policy of not addressing rumors and disregarding criticism as simply being hate.
Sure feels weird to hear him say that now, doesn't it? Unfortunately, things only got worse for Theft. Now that he'd gotten himself into a huge dispute with the community, multiple people started coming out with their experiences interacting with Theft on their own, and those experiences were overwhelmingly negative. Jelly Liam, the lead developer of Aftonbuilt Theft had spoken to for his aforementioned video on said game, revealed that Theft had manipulated, guilt-tripped, and even attempted to bribe him, just so he wouldn't let his co-director run the video through Scott Cawthon's lawyers to ensure it didn't breach a non-disclosure agreement Liam's dev team Gelatin had signed prior with Scott. Considering the video was openly discussing business arrangements between Gelatin and Scott, Liam and his co-director at Gelatin were perfectly within their right to run the video through Scott's lawyers first, and I don't understand why Theft was so adamant to prevent this. If he didn't expect to be inconvenienced like this, why did he even bother to make a video going over business arrangements to begin with? It's unclear, and the screenshots make Theft look really bad. Also, remember the drama Theft covered involving Ultranite, Meklas, and Ramonov, the three devs who were plotting behind everyone's back to gather Fanverse information and leak it? When Theft pledged to dive headfirst into the situation and make a video, a Twitter user named Coco's BSFM allegedly made a negative comment towards him. Later, after the video on the situation had come out, Coco's apologized for making that comment, and Theft spoke to them in DMs, harshly ripping it apart and ragging on Coco's English, claiming to not even understand what Coco's was apologizing for, even though it stated in the apology that they were apologizing for a negative comment they made towards Theft. Anyone can understand that, even with the poor grammar. Coco's could have been more specific, but Theft came off as extremely judgmental, even going so far as to suggest a more proper version of the apology. What really gets me though is what he said after the fact. He tried to pressure Coco's into praising and promoting his video and the apology as well, which is honestly just indicative of a tremendous ego. Coco's did not owe Theft a shout out, and Theft was way out of line for trying to guilt them into this. Just today, Theft announced his plans to take a break from Twitter after he apologized for the unhinged comments he made on his stream and finally pledged to make better, less clickbait thumbnails. Words don't mean anything without action to back them up, of course, but I will say, at least he finally acknowledged and pledged to take into account what people were criticizing him for in the first place. However, with all the events leading up to this point and all the other things that have come out about Theft since, it's safe to say that the damage to his reputation has already been done. By now, a large portion of the FNAF community has firmly turned against him. YouTubers who frequently collaborated with him up until this point, such as Dags and the Baddest, have publicly disavowed and distanced themselves from him, and there don't seem to be many people left on his side, at least on Twitter. Theft does seem to be continuing his plans for new content that I'd wager would still be massively successful even in the wake of this controversy. It's unclear if he'll actually make good on his promise to improve his thumbnails. He still hasn't addressed his toxic behavior in regards to his interactions with Jelly Liam and Coco's BSFM, among others, and it's also unclear if he ever will. Unfortunately, the skeletons in his closet are now in full view of anyone willing to do any research on him, and it may take him a while to move past them or own up for his actions in their entirety. And that, dear viewers, is where the story ends for now. These past months have earned Theft King a spot as one of the most prominent YouTubers of his niche, but with all the drama surrounding his name, his presence on social media now hangs in the balance of an uncertain future. I'd like to make one thing very clear. In spite of all his faults, including but potentially not limited to toxicity, clickbait, fear-mongering, deflection of criticism, and self-victimization, I do not believe Theft is incapable of change, nor do I think he is a downright horrible person. Based on these recent events, he seems to genuinely be in a really bad place mentally. And I want to stress that harassing him or aggressively pestering him in any way, shape, or form is not okay and never was okay. It's important to understand that these situations are never black and white and always involve a level of nuance. While I personally lean toward the idea that Theft overblew his harassment to an insane degree, I don't deny at all that he did receive some very real hate, and I condemn such behavior. I have an obligation to lay out his wrongdoings and explain them as someone who is affiliated with him in the past, but I do not condone hate campaigns or anything of the sort, and I strongly request all of you not to add more fuel to the fire. I suppose I should end this video by saying that I genuinely hope Theft gets better. I do not consider myself an overly vindictive person, and I want to see people improve and redeem themselves. If Theft takes accountability for his past actions and makes an effort to rise above them, that would be great, even though I know it would take a while for the FNAF community to be ready to accept that. This drama has been genuinely depressing to witness, especially as someone who up until a few days ago considered himself on decent terms with theft. And I hope everyone negatively impacted by this take care of themselves to the best of their abilities. I'm Poseidon, and thank you so much for watching this video and hearing what I had to say on the matter. Until next time, have a fantastic day, and goodbye.